CodeKit includes a tool called Purge Css, which removes unused CSS rules from your style sheets. For example, here I have style.css and two rules defined, Springsteen and Bon Jovi. In my index.html file, I use Springsteen, but Bon Jovi is nowhere to be found. So when CodeKit processes this style sheet, in the compiled output, that Bon Jovi rule is removed. Now, you can enable Purge CSS on a file-by-file basis for any style sheet language simply by choosing the file and then selecting Purge Unused CSS Rules. Either choose Always or one of the options for the build environment in production or development. Now, you can change your build environment in Project Settings, General, right here, between production and development. So it's very easy to rapidly switch on different tools for when you're building in a debug environment or when you're building to actually ship your website live. Notice that CodeKit syncs this value to the node-env environment variable so that other scripts in your project can get to the build environment you've selected. You can also enable Purge CSS for all files of a particular language at once by choosing that language in the project settings area and changing the Purge Unused CSS option here. This will affect all CSS files in my project, not just the one I selected in the list. In the project settings area, under the tools category, you'll find options to control Purge CSS. The thing to remember is that this tool takes each rule in a CSS file and scans all the types of files you list here to see if that rule is used. If it doesn't find a use of that rule in any of these files, it will remove that rule from the compiled CSS output. What that means is that if your project uses a custom type of file where you also use CSS rules, you must add that type to this list here, or Purge CSS won't know to scan those files, and it may remove CSS rules that you need in your final output. Now, CodeKit ships with a long default list that covers most common file types, but if you use custom ones, be sure to edit this list. Notice the format. What this says is that in any folder that's not named node modules and any subfolder thereof, look in any PHP file to see if I've used a CSS rule. You should follow this format when you add your own custom file types. Next, be aware that Purge CSS is very naive in the way that it searches for rules, and that's by design. So for example, it just looks for Springsteen or Bon Jovi. So as long as you use those names directly, you'll be fine. Where you get into trouble is if you do something like this. Combine parts of a different name together and then use getElementById in JavaScript or similar things like this. Here, Springsteen will not trigger because it doesn't appear all together in one string. Spring and Steen are separate, so Purge CSS won't see a use of Springsteen. And if this is all I had, it would remove that rule from my compiled CSS. The correct way to do that is to obviously use the string directly or make sure that the string is all together in one spot so that Purge CSS finds it when it searches your JavaScript files. If you have a situation where you just have to break up a CSS rule, maybe because your CMS requires it or your JavaScript is complicated, you can use the safe list to tell Purge CSS to never remove a particular rule. For example, if I add a new entry and name that Bon Jovi, then go back and compile my style.css file, I'll see that in the output, Bon Jovi now appears even though I don't use that rule anywhere in my project.